thanking Patrick for his excellent contribution. I am the president, so if you have any rotten tomatoes, get ready to throw them now. Otherwise, the next speaker will be Stuart Richardson from Birmingham Against the Cuts.
We had some wonderful rhetoric today, particularly from the Orgreave speaker, and we have a constant rhetoric about fighting austerity. Unfortunately, there's not a great deal of real activity that occurs in the movement about opposing it. And one of the aims of the previous campaign, which I'm also involved in, and the Birmingham Against the Cuts, is to actually engage in real campaigns against austerity. We were formed in just after the general election of 2010 by the Birmingham TUC, and we're a coalition of activists, trade unionists, Labour Party members who have been campaigning against the cuts, particularly in Birmingham, that have taken place. And I also think that, particularly in the era of a new radical leadership of the Labour Party, what has happened to the care workers in Birmingham is particularly shocking. You know, a situation where the council announces that you're on 35 hours a week, now you're on 24 hours a week, massive cuts in pay that's occurring, you know. And it does seem to me, I'm not a member of the Labour Party myself, but people in the Labour Party should try to bring these councillors who are imposing these massive pay cuts in complete contradiction to Labour Party's policy of supporting a minimum wage, supporting a living wage. They should try to bring these people to account. And it's not a question that we might have had time to do it. In 2 years this has been going on. But I'll just talk about one of the other campaigns we've been involved in recently. It's very well known that nursery education, particularly for socially deprived children, is extremely valuable in terms of getting their access to educational facilities in their later life. And the Birmingham Council has, I think there's still, in some sense exist, 14 nurseries. They're actually concentrated in some of the most socially deprived areas of Birmingham, in Handsworth, Sparkhill, Yardley area. And there was quite a vigorous campaign, so vigorous even Jess Phillips turned up for one meeting, to actually oppose that. And she was very interesting. She came along and she pointed out that the state nurseries, the council nurseries, are willing to take children with multiple needs, autism, etc. And the private nurseries are not, because they're too difficult and demanding for those to handle those children. So the privatisation of these nurseries is going to hit some of the most vulnerable children in this city. And now there was a vigorous campaign, there was a series of lobbies. We've done a lot of lobbies of the council recently, and we've had a number of councillors speaking at those lobbies. Unfortunately, and there are a number of councillors who are supporters of Momentum. Unfortunately, they haven't actually pursued that. The obvious thing would be to put a resolution to the Labour group and say this privatisation of the nursery should not take place. Now, you could say, well, this is inevitable, the council got no money. And I'll just finish with this really, in terms of, because we've also had a lobby recently around the supporting the bin workers. One of the most disgraceful things imaginable is that the city council used the anti-union laws at a cost of £1.4 million to take Unite to the High Court to declare their industrial action unlawful. A Labour council using the vicious laws of the Tory government to deny workers democratic right to strike. They of course lost that. Now that 1.4 million could have kept the Birmingham nurseries going for 3 years. It's estimated the total cost of the dispute is something like about 12 or 15 million. You could have kept those nurseries going for 30 years. So we have a terrible set of priorities running the council. And just finish with this. I mean, people seen in the paper already that the council's determination to go ahead with the Commonwealth Games. They have initially said, oh, we can do it without hitting basic services. It's been recently exposed that the council has had to borrow 50 million and will pay £2 million interest a year. That 2 million will be set against of the general expenditures. So we need a completely different attitude of resistance and combativity from the Labour Council to the policies of meekly implement the cuts, meekly implement. Just to finish, to say, we meet every the third Wednesday of the month, like the KOMP, at the Wellington pub at 7:30, and we have a very interesting set of discussions. Richard Hatcher, who unfortunately couldn't be here, does a lot of research on this, and actually feeds into different organisation Momentum and the Trades Council, that his analysis and resistance to the cuts. So I think it's very important that we maintain and build these movements against the cuts, and hopefully people can come along to some of the meetings of the Birmingham Against the Cuts. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Stuart, for another excellent contribution. We now have Precious Scott, a poet. I accidentally put down young poet, comma, humour, full stop. I got picked up on that. I was wrong about the humour and everything else, but young, definitely, and here she is.
You look younger though.
Thank you. Save the best for last.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. So, it's a bit tall. Okay. When I was asked to do this, I thought I'd put my union head on, because I've been an activist for years. I'm a retired member, so I'm not that young. And listening to all the talks this afternoon, I felt as if I've copied some of your stuff. But it just shows you that, you know, with solidarity, we all think the same, and we all feel the same. So this is my little take on what's been happening in Birmingham. Home carers striking 2 years now, led by their convener Mandy Buckley. Despite more cash from the government and the increases in council tax bills for social care, the system still remains on a cliff's edge. Mandy and her co-workers saw their numbers slashed by 40%, with work patterns designed to bring them to their knees or surrender. Some did, but many remained. They cannot afford to strike, and they cannot afford not to strike. So what do? Strike, 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 supported by their union. You can join in, you know. And they still need our support today. Now back onto the greatest pension robbery, as was eloquently discussed earlier on. And the bit I was interested in was in 2018, when in the House of Parliament, when the banner came out, the Great Pension Robbery, and the protesters, they're all branded WASPy, they said, and they said they were quickly escorted out of Parliament by security, but not before being met with a standing ovation by the Labour and the SNP ministers. Pensions stolen from them and plunged into poverty with no assistance from the failing universal credit. And applaud sounding like a Mexican wave to protest the Chancellor's speech. I'm all for equal rights, but this stealth by hand is downright theft. 45,000 stolen from these women who were owed a debt of gratitude. That's 45,000 each. Now reaching twilight years and hung out to dry, retirement plans shot to pieces, some sadly even die, never getting to reap their hard-earned state pension, mission accomplished by these Tory cronies. These women cannot strike, some have no jobs. But what can we give them? Our support, our support. And we now await the Back to the 60 judicial review. Now to the refuse collectors. Secret payments were made to the one non-striking union. I'm not going to mention their name. So what do you call a cut that heals? What do you get? A scab. The victory of the bin workers has shown yet again that trade union does work. So what did they do? They striked and they got results. And I was saving the best for last, and that was for Arthur, our Arthur. Back in 1979, Britain produced 122 million tonnes of coal from nearly 300 mines. Despite 30 years after Arthur Scargill's endeavours, wholesale closure of the British coal industry continues. But who has his finger on Britain's light switch now? It's a billionaire from Russia. Importing 4 times as much coal as it produces, Russia, subject to international sanctions over Ukraine, is UK's biggest supplier, providing close to half of all the coal we bring in now, with only a few mines left in the UK, perhaps to be closed in a few years' time. Arthur has shunned the limelight and not in the news as much. I told someone I was going to meet him today, and they said, "Ooh, that woman gave him a tough time." But I replied, "Really? Where is she now?" Arthur is still with us. We know that he's not very well today, and we wish him all our best. And we want to say to you, Arthur, we thank you for all that you've done for us and wish you a speedy recovery. Thank you. Thank you.